Welcome back in, everybody. I'm Ben Parker. It's such a pleasure to have all of you on board with us as every week. Shane is with us. I don't think Shane has missed a show since we started it. Shane, love having you, man. Austin is out tonight. He and his Tricky Takes group will probably mention this at the end of the show. They're off doing a Major League Baseball special podcast about all the trades and signings. So we'll miss Austin tonight, but me and Shane are going to have a rock'em sock'em show tonight. We got a lot of stuff to cover. Shane, are you ready to get to it, man?
I'm ready. I'm just trying not to be Wally Pip, to pull from the tricky takes. So keep my Iron Man streak alive.
You got the Iron Man streak for sure. All right, so I'm going to start a little screen share here. Shane, last week we decided to maybe suggest that some coaches might be on their way out the door, maybe others were safe. We found a lot of safe ones, really. And what I did, I kind of pulled from that list from last week. So over here, we got these three teams: the Jets, Saints, and Bears. Of course, they're all toast already. They're going to be looking for new guys. We know that. These were the next four teams that me, you, and Austin as a panel kind of felt like had the most danger. So the Jaguars, the Giants, the Cowboys, and then even the Bengals maybe kind of look like there's a good chance they may have an opening at the end of the year too. And then I put over this side, these are three teams that we weren't real sure might be looking for a new head coach. The Raiders, the very good chance Pierce is out the door, but we'll see. And then the Colts and Dolphins, we were kind of feeling like they might be safe, especially the Dolphins. But anyway, that's kind of the loose picture as it is right now. Season's not over. A lot could change with each of these teams, but that's just kind of where we're at now. Tonight, Shane, you and I are going to pull about three head coaching candidates out that these teams should definitely be looking at. And this isn't a popularity list that we pulled off the internet. This is me and you. If we're the owner or if we're the GM, this is who we would want to come in and coach our football team, no questions asked. Or maybe this is maybe guy number three on the list is a guy that we really are interested in. We want to talk to him and see what he's going to tell us, see if we like the direction he's willing to take it. So Shane, go ahead and give us your first guy here and tell us who these teams should be looking at.
I think the first guy to discuss has kind of been the guy that's for the last 2 years been the name on a lot of people's list, and that's probably Ben Johnson. Detroit has continued to be a great offensive team. He got an awful lot of play the last year with Washington, with some other teams. You look at some of the difficulties here with the ones that we've already mentioned that have changed. If you're Chicago, do we want to bring in a guy that's been great by resurrecting a quarterback and getting an offense with some wide receivers? That kind of fits Chicago's need, right? We look at the Saints, had a great defense, had quarterback play that couldn't hold up, and injuries really hurt them. Now, Cubic had a great start to the season, and once injuries packed up, their offense really shut down. You give Ben Johnson a try there. If you're the Jets, you have the weapons. You're going to have to figure out your quarterback situation. And I think they would talk to him. I think everyone that's got a chance to look at a coach, I think Ben Johnson gets an opportunity here. The big thing for him is that he's proven that he's selective. He's going to tell those teams what he's looking for and what he wants, not only monetarily, but I also think staff building, GM that he's going to work with, things like that. So there are some teams that may already have him off the list, but I think he's the number one that popped into my head right away. I think he's going to have a ton of offers. I think Detroit's going to go far in the playoffs, so it's going to be another thing where he's going to be a keystone that really decides where the coaching carousel ends up at the end of the year.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just put out there. Ben Johnson is my number one guy as well. I'm always a little concerned when it's a guy's first time at head coaching, but that's okay. You got to get your first time somewhere, somehow. And if it were ever going to be a guy, this is the guy. Ben Johnson, the offense is crisp. I want to talk to him about his defense, who's going to get bringing in. But if I feel like he can replicate the offense, I know he can bring in a defensive coordinator, at least keep him competitive. So no matter which team I am in the NFL, I'm talking to Ben Johnson. He may not want to talk to me for very long. Like you said, he's selective, but every team in the NFL that's got a spot or a vacancy should be willing to wait to talk to Ben Johnson, is my feeling on it. All right, I'm going to put down a name here. Brian Flores. Brian Flores is a guy who's coached before. I liked the work that he did when he was coaching before. Not that it was flawless, but boy, you had the winning seasons, and you didn't have the playoff appearances to back it up. But that's not necessarily his fault. I like Brian Flores' work. You can see him there with the defensive work there. Again, we know he's a top defensive coordinator in the NFL, but I liked him as a head coach too. The players, by and large, responded to him. There were some guys who didn't like his style, so they were willing to kind of cut out. But I like Brian Flores. The one thing I will ask him is, hey, are you going to be able to back off a little bit, lighten up a little bit, whether it's dealing with the general manager, kind of get a little bit of power struggle there. If you don't like what he's doing, well, you're still going to have to work with him. So do I feel like you've kind of matured a little bit past that point? But just as a head coach, I really like Brian Flores, at least to talk to. Maybe not for every single team, but a lot of these teams should be talking to Brian Flores, in my opinion. And listen, maybe he decides, hey, it's not this year. I'll wait another year or two myself and keep working on this. But Flores is a guy I like. All right, feel free to comment on Flores or not. Give us your next name.
First of all, I do like Flores, but I think just like you said, the personality issue is going to be the question for him. I think Brian Flores is kind of from that, Belichick Parcells, where if you want me to be the head coach, then I also got to pick some of the groceries. I think
Yeah,
for him, a lot of the problem was that he didn't really want Tua, and that
right.
became kind of a power struggle inside, and that probably led to some of the issues. My next pick, again, some people are not going to like the way that he handles things, but for me, it's Mike Vrabel. I think for what he did in Tennessee, I don't think that he gets all the credit he should. That team, other than Derrick Henry, was not really built, where they didn't go out and get some of the other weapons until late in that. I think from a team standpoint, even players that maybe Vrabel's not their top guy, the guys that have gone out from underneath them all seem to love him. Has a good coaching tree for guys that have gone on since being a part of him. I'm sure he'd be able to pull some people in. And the other thing for him is he's going to play things his way. He's a lot like Dan Campbell in that way, where it's a strong personality head coach. You're going to be able to know that he's the one that's in charge. And for some of these teams that are struggling and have had losing seasons back to back, I think you need that. You need a guy that's going to come in and shake things up. And also a great defensive mind. So if you're from a team that needs a little bit of help with that, you know that he's going to play a part in that role as well.
See, I'm going to talk about Brable here in a second and share some of my opinions and concerns both. Because I mean, everybody's got concerns, right? Brable was my number 3 here. All right, so you're looking at my top 3. This is it, and this is where my list is going to separate big time from a national media list where they got 10, 12, 15 candidates. For me, this is the list. It's these 3 guys. You may have another name you're adding on here in a second. I'll ask if Flores was one of your top 3, but for me, these are the 3 guys. I've got other guys I'll have to consider because there's more openings than 3, right? But this is the list, man. It's Ben Johnson, who's a red hot offensive coordinator who's doing it at a high level for a couple of seasons. And then it's 2 proven guys with Flores and Vrabel, who maybe you got a little bit of concerns about doing this, that, the other, but that's the list. After that, man, if I'm one of these teams with an opening, I'm doing everything I can to get one of these 3 guys. If I pick out the guy I really want, I'm going to go after him hard. I'm not going to play around. I'm not going to bring in 10 other guys for interviews and go through the process. It's one of these 3 guys. That's where I'm at on this. So I am going to ask you, though, was Flores in your top 3, or did you have him buried down farther?
I had Flores in my top 5, but I didn't have him in my
Okay.
top 3. And I think we hit on it. For me, it's more of a personality thing. And I also think, like whatever media wants to say, the NFL holds a grudge. And Brian Flores has a lawsuit against the NFL. And, the commissioner works for the owners. And there's a lot of times where maybe you're not blackballed, but it's known to your owner that I'm not going to make life real easy for you if you go against the better wishes of the NFL. So that was the only thing for Flores. I mean, again, being a Patriots fan, always enjoyed what he did as a defensive coach in DC. I think Miami, you could certainly say, like, where are they that much better with McDaniels now than they were with Flores? Like, you look at the records, you look at what's happened. You change the defensive team to an offensive team, but you're still not getting any
Yeah,
farther. So, you know, that's where I think this year more than anywhere, there in my man, there's no NCAA coach that's going to pop out. Normally in years past, there's been one hot college coach that GMs are going to want to talk to. I don't think there's one that's going to pop up. I think Dan Lanning would make a good opportunity, but I don't think he wants out of college. And I don't think it's his goal to do that. So I don't see him. I don't see any of the other retreads. I think with the Belichick scenario in the University of North Carolina, I think that's also going to be a domino that's going to fall. I think NFL GMs probably have not warmed up to him at all. And I think that's probably another reason why he's looking in the college game. So, like you said, I think now if you're looking, there's not a lot of coaches that are sitting around where I would give them a second call. I liked Arthur Smith as an offensive coordinator. I think he's pulling some magic in Pittsburgh with, questionable offense all the time, but I don't think he gets a shot right off the bat again. And so, that's the same thing. Like, I think we talked about Cincinnati, Zach Robinson, I think, you probably should move on from him. But the guy that you had in place that was a possibility, Callahan is in Tennessee. They're not doing great right now either. So, like I said, I had Flores in my top 5. I didn't have him in the top 3. And really, that wasn't because of his coaching. It was more personality issues. I think he's going to have to really trust the GM. And you don't always get to pick your GM when you're in a head coach spot like this.
it's a two-way street. I agree about Flores. Mike Vrabel, I love Vrabel. I would absolutely want him to coach my football team, and I'm 100% confident that if I give him a good roster and I'm working with him, that we've got a real chance at a Super Bowl. I don't know that he's such a dominant head coach that he's in Super Bowl hunts every year, but I'm 100% confident that we're going to be competitive. We're going to win our share of divisions. And if I give him a good enough roster, he can take that to a Super Bowl. I just don't doubt that at all. My concerns with Vrabel are the offense. He was there for 5 years in Tennessee. The quarterback play went from pretty good to really sucky. I mean, he had to deal with all of that, right? And then the offense, it wasn't so much the points per game because in the first season and a half, it was low. Then it got hot. He had a really good top 10 and then a top 3 offense in those couple of seasons, and then it went right back down. So I'm not so much worried about PPG. I am worried about predictability. His offense was very simplistic, unimaginative, and that made it a lot easier to stop come playoff time. It didn't matter so much during the regular season, but you start going up against the Kansas Cities and the
Mm-hmm.
Baltimores and the Cincinnatis and these really heavy hitters who also have pretty good defenses. And you're like, dang it, we're a step behind here on offense because either we've got to be so good we can physically dominate and bully ball and then play action, which we weren't quite that good, or we're going to have to get more imaginative. So I would want to talk to him about who he's going to bring in as OC, and is Mike going to be able to not be quite so stubborn about we do it this way and only this way. Start off with that good physical run game, the good offensive line, the tight end that can block and catch. I'm fine starting it there, but as our time here together progresses, I want to know that this offense is going to build out and grow a little bit, flex some. If I go to the draft and get you a Luther Burden out of Missouri, are you going to use him, or are you just going to kind of keep him on the sideline for special packages? I want to know that. Are you going to flex out a little bit here with me? We got that good foundation. I'm okay with that, but I want to see this offense develop a little bit. So once we get to the playoffs, it's the big time teams, we can start to flex out a little bit. So that would be my interest there in
Mm-hmm.
Vrabel, but he's one of my 3. There's no question about it. I would love to see him with the Bears. That would tickle me to death if they couldn't get Ben Johnson. They go and pick up Mike Vrabel. All right, you got one more name in your top 3, and then I'm gonna hit one more name. We'll just stop at 5 tonight, but go ahead and lay it on us.
The other one that was a surprise for me, I don't think it would have been as apt before the season started, but I think Aaron Glenn, DC for the Detroit Lions, is also going to get a shot in this runaround. Um, he has pulled that defense together, proven that once you draft some defensive backs and let them play, you're going to be okay. Um, I think, like you said, it's been hot now to get the offensive coach. I mean, you look at our top 5 list, we've gone in the reverse. Um, and I think that's going to be the point. I think teams are going to start looking back to the defense. And I think, like you mentioned, when you look at the Titans during Vrabel's run, and, every chance I get to talk about it, the NFL now, regardless of what people say, you need a top tier quarterback. Like anything that's not top tier is going to get you to be a Titans. You're going to be first round of the playoffs and lose every year. And nowadays, that's not worth it. You're going to get let go in 3 seasons. You can win, 10 games a year and not get a playoff victory, and you're going to be in this spot time and time again. I think defense is going to start being a thing where we're looking again. I think in some ways, a true pass rush disruptor can probably make your defense better quicker than any offensive player other than quarterback. So I think that's going to be a move that comes in the NFL. You look at a lot of the teams that we're talking about right here. Chicago, you have some offensive weapons already in place. The Saints, you're going to have to make a decision. That's the Saints one is the tough one for me. Like I think they're so desperately in cap doom that I don't know what coach is going to be the coach that decides to take that, because you're going to have, and there is no guarantee anymore, but you're going to have a guarantee that you're going to let me try to work this out, because you've put me in a space where I can't go out and get players to help me out. So we're going to have to draft real well, and we're going to have to take our lumps. With the Giants, you have some offensive weapons. You've had a back that's been a surprise this year. You have wide receivers. The offensive line has not been great, but they haven't been as bad as they have been in years past. Dallas is, they're the Cowboys. There's no other team that reacts like that, because there's no other owner like that. They're going to have a hand in that. Cincinnati, we've talked about it on this podcast numerous times. Joe Burrow and Chase are the top 2 players at their position right now, and they lose games because they just can't pull it out. At one point, how long do you let the head coach go? Can you get defensive players? The other thing is, Cincinnati's been notoriously, I don't know how else you say it, but money is the number one issue in Cincinnati. You get up to a level and they don't want to pay those players. And it's going to be a T. Higgins issue. It's going to be a Hendricks issue, one of their top defensive players. The last couple of years, they've lost defensive backs and it's starting to catch up to them. So, like I said, I think it's a tough go for candidates this year. I think it's probably going to swing more defensively, like is what we've mentioned before.
I've got the name Bill O'Brien on here, and that's way out from where most people are going to be looking, and I get that. To me, when I look at this year's group of coordinators, I just wasn't as excited about them and their NFL future as head coaches. But give me another year or two, and I'll warm up to some of them again. It cycles through. The reason I'm reaching back for Bill O'Brien is I expect some stability. I liked his coaching work in Houston. I will not give him any GM influence of any kind, because I think he sucked at that. But a stabilizing force. If I can't get one of the 3 big ones, and by the way, this is where if I'm an NFL GM, NFL franchise, I'm going hard after one of the names that I really want. But if I can't land them, a guy like Bill O'Brien, maybe to the Jets, the Jaguars, start bringing back some stability. Let's compete. Let's set a good foundation. I feel like he can do that. He showed some offensive ingenuity as well as being willing to stick the staples and work off the good foundations. So that's a name that I'm also going to bring in here as well. But just wasn't super excited once you got past these top three guys here on the list. All right, we're going to talk about this some more. Again, we're starting to kind of lay a foundation here. We're not necessarily tying these guys to teams, but we'll here over the next week or two, we'll add some more names to this list of guys we at least want to talk to if we can't get one of the big ones. And then we'll start tying them to specific teams and places maybe a little bit after that as we get deeper into December. All right, Shane, thanks for working with us on that segment. We'll get back to that later. Switching gears here, I'm going to talk about Micah Parsons. Still hasn't got a big deal yet. I'm going to ask the question, Shane, tonight. Would the Cowboys have a better chance at a Super Bowl over the next 2 to 3 years if they let Micah Parsons go? Now, I'm going to state the obvious first. Nobody wants to let Micah Parsons go. Absolutely nobody, all right? There's not a person on the planet who wants to let go of Micah Parsons, including me. But you step back, you take a look at it. We're going to look at it from a financials perspective here tonight. We're just going to ask the question. I'll go through some of the cap numbers here in just a second. But that's the question. They've already signed Prescott. They've already signed Lamb. They're already committed to those two players. So letting go of one of those two players really isn't an option for the next couple of years. That leaves Parsons. All right. So here's the Cowboys cap situation for 2024, current season. You can see here Micah Parsons coming in at about 2% of the salary cap, still on that rookie deal. It's not much. Prescott comes in at 17% of the cap, which is very large. That's on the high end. And then CeeDee Lamb comes in at 3%. Right now, you put them all three together, and they're eating up about 22% of the cap. All right, those three players. And that's fairly somewhat normal for three top players. Prescott's getting a large chunk of that, obviously. And then Lamb and Parsons still in those rookie deals, not getting as much. That's going to change in 2025. All right, so we'll go ahead and spin over here to 2025. The cap, of course, will grow some. The Cowboys have about $22 million of cap space this year that they're not using. It's going to roll over into next year. I've already included that. But the three players' contracts are going to grow a lot. CeeDee Lamb will really be in the first year of that new extension. Prescott will be in the first really big year of his new extension. And then Parsons will be on that fifth-year option. Those numbers all put together, and these three players alone are going to eat up 50% of the salary cap. Now, part of that is based on the projection of what the actual cap will be. But again, it's not going to change too much. It's not like the cap will grow so much that all of a sudden it's 30% of the cap, 40. It's going to be pretty close to 50% of the cap, which is incredibly high. I'd have to go back and double check. Other than the Broncos with Russell Wilson eating up, so much dead cap space, I'm not sure that any NFL team has ever competed like this with three players eating up this much cap space. And then we get to 2026. If Micah Parsons were to sign a new deal, I just assigned him $30 million a year. That seemed to fit with a lot of the numbers we were looking at. It could be a little bit larger, a little bit less, but $30 million a year. Even with the cap space growing, again, overall NFL cap space grows every year. We've allowed for that. It's still about 45% that these three players are going to eat up. So you can see, just from a money perspective, it's pushing a snowball up a mountain, right? That snowball gets bigger and bigger, harder and harder. And Dallas isn't exactly competing for Super Bowls right now anyway. Regular season, good. Super Bowl competition, not so much. They're just kind of disappearing. So that's the basis for the question. And I've been doing this a long time. I've had all kinds of pearls of wisdom when I bring up this cap space stuff. Stuff like, well, you got to build through the draft. As if Dallas hasn't been trying to build through the draft for their entire lifetime, right? And they'll hear stuff like, oh, you got to get the right pieces around these top three players. Like, yeah, I get it. They've been trying to get the right pieces around. I mean, it just doesn't stop. It'll be like, just find the money. You never let go of good players. Don't ever let go of a good player. The cap allows for that. Just all kind of. It's just the way the NFL works. There's all kinds of cliches that get thrown around when you bring up cap space, but those aren't strategies. So Shane, I know I'm coming at it from a heavy finance perspective here, but even considering it's this large, if you're Dallas, would you go ahead and add Parsons on anyway and just try to figure it out from there? Is that still ultimately the side you'd land on?
I mean, like you said, the big thing is Micah Parsons is still young, still effective. So there's nobody there that says we should just get rid of him. It's not a Saquon Barkley where you're going, hey, is he going to continue to be at the same level as what he was? And so the Giants decide he's not worth it at that amount for us. I think Parsons still is probably the best defender they have. He takes care of a lot of the ills that they haven't been able to build around him. Um, I think a big problem for them, though, is I don't think Micah Parsons has any love for the Dallas Cowboys. I
It
think
doesn't
Micah
seem to.
Parsons, yeah, I think he's made it very well known that he's a Pittsburgh guy. Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. Philadelphia has done, deals like this before. They have no problem sticking it to the Cowboys. Um, he's also, out there on social media. Does Micah Parsons, like, Dallas is big in the NFL, but it's not New York City, it's not Los Angeles. Does a team like that want to make a run? Uh, I just don't see him with the Cowboys moving forward. I think that, like you've mentioned, and it shows certainly not so much in 26, but in next year. I mean, you're looking at three players owning your team, you know, uh, and are you going to get the most out of them to be able to take care of that cap hit? That's tough telling, especially when you're going to say that Micah Parsons, like you said, you had to pick up what that fifth year would be. I think on the open market, you can get an awful lot more for him. He might be one that if I'm a team that's looking right now, I think that if you don't mind putting him inside and the Rams don't mind getting rid of draft picks, I think
Right.
the Rams make a run at him. I think they would love to put another weapon on their defense. Verse and Fisk have played well for them. I think you're going to see teams that are going to start making offers um, that are going to try to make a run at Parsons. And like I said, I haven't seen where he's bought in that, he now in the NFL, you don't really stay with one team your whole career. That's not really the thing anymore. But
Right.
I haven't seen where he's had any, love affair with the Cowboys. And I think this year, as dysfunctional as it been with, you know, can we put the roof on? Do we know if we block out lights so that our DBs can see the ball, our wide receivers can see the ball? Should we have gotten rid of our coach before? Would it be helpful to have a running back? All these questions that come up. And Micah Parsons is still asked to go out there, and now he's the only person that they're really looking for to stop this defense. So if I'm the Cowboys, I think you have to move on. And if I'm Micah Parsons, I want to move on anyway. Uh, if I'm Dallas, I try to get him as the highest value I can, and I would shop him around.
Yeah, it's a great point you make about Parsons and his outspokenness and how he doesn't really seem to be particularly in love with Dallas as much as everybody's in love with Micah. He's a very outspoken guy. I mean, on podcasts, in after the game, in interviews, you name it, he is going to come out with his opinions, and they have not always been kind to teammates or coaches or the organization. So that's a great point. I could be talked into keeping Parsons or letting go of him. If I'm a part of the staff and Jerry Jones is still kind of king of the day and it's all about the brand and the star and the logo, then we're keeping Parsons. That's end of story, right? It's about the stars. It's about bringing in the big bucks. We'll win 10, 11, 12 games maybe and flame out in the playoffs. That's dumb, but hey, this is what the owner wanted. That's what we're going to do. If I could reel back time a little bit, I would be a lot more willing to let go of Prescott because to me, that price tag just really keeps you from winning and building out a roster the way I would want to. And I would keep Lamb and Parsons because I get basically half the price of Prescott, but I got two tremendous players at the top of their game. Those are the two I would keep. I would let Prescott go on, and I would bring in a young quarterback and work with him and spread the
Mm-hmm.
cap space around. But we can't do that now. That's water under the bridge. So got to make a decision on Parsons. I'd be fielding every offer I could on Parsons, like you just said, and seeing, man, can I get a couple of first round picks for him and the cap space benefit? That's so key, man, because you're never, unless you get Abdul Carter and he explodes, you're never going to get another Micah Parsons, right? That's not the point. We know this next first rounder we bring in just isn't going to be Parsons. We know that. But we got the two first rounders and the cap space, maybe. I'd be very interested. I'd be listening to every phone call about that, especially if I'm trying to build out a Super Bowl winner here. The worst thing to do, and don't do this, is don't let him become a free agent and then watch him go
Yeah.
sign with Washington or the Giants or God forbid the Eagles, right? Do not do that. Either sign him next offseason while you still got him under control or trade him. One or the other. Do not let it get to 2026 offseason. That would be the absolute worst thing to me. Let's move on, man. I got some lead stories here, and I got a special version of lead stories called Ratliff's Reactions. All right. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna hit the highlights of these teams real quick. Then I'm gonna ask some questions or make some statements, and Robert Ratliff's gonna get like 2 sentences to just boom, boom. Here's my instant reaction on this, and maybe we'll talk more about some of them later in future episodes. The Lions outraced the Packers with Campbell's gambles paying off. The Chiefs keep winning. Somehow they just keep on winning. It's very unusual. The Steelers survived the Jameis Winston experience, and they're now 10-3. The Rams outraced the Bills in that 44-2. I don't know what you call it, but that was fun to watch. The Eagles hold on against a stubborn Panther team up there in Philadelphia. I didn't think that was a good match for the Carolina Panthers, but they showed that they could hang with it. And then the Seahawks beat the Cardinals, and they now control the NFC West at their leisure, according to how good they can actually win. So here they are. Shane, here's the first one. Dan Campbell's gambles leave you feeling totally fine. You're 100% fine with it. You're cool with what he's doing. Or sometimes it's a little bit queasy, a little bit on the edge of your seat, fingers crossed, worried about maybe this one's going to backfire a little bit.
I think there's definitely stomach juices churning sometimes when you see this. But the thing about Dan Campbell is he's himself. So if I hired him and I want him to be the coach that he is, then I balance against, some of these clock mismanagement. And, we're going to talk about the Bills if you want to talk about clock mismanagement. So
moving on, the Steelers, I mentioned them with a pretty convincing win against Cleveland. They're now 10-3. So I'm going to fast forward here to late January, and it's the AFC title game. And the Steelers are in Kansas City going up against the Chiefs. We know the Chiefs will be favored, but percentage-wise, out of 100%, what percent chance would you give Pittsburgh in that game as we now see these two teams?
I'm in that 65-70 range. Mike Tomlin has done for years an amazing job of taking no offense and some defensive players and getting to 10 wins every single year. Their offense has popped up when they've needed to. The defense has stayed strong for them. I thought that it was going to be tough sledding for the Steelers, and each time they've had to come up against a better team, they've fought. With the way, we've mentioned with the Chiefs, the NFL, whichever deity you pray to, seems to be on their side. So can Pittsburgh turn that around? I think that's difficult for anybody.
Number 3, I just talked about the Carolina Panthers hanging on or being stubborn there in Philadelphia. They've won 2 or 3 games over the past several weeks, and they've barely lost to both the Chiefs and the Eagles. So it's been quite the turnaround. But here's the statement. I feel good about the Panthers in 2025, not only keeping Bryce Young as my primary option, but building around him. I've seen enough.
I think Bryce Young has come back from the benching. I think the team has rallied around him. I was never a big fan of his before. I think he's just small, and I think that's tough in today's NFL. So I would always worry about injuries, but I think he's proven that he can lead that team. And if they get some weapons around him, I don't think he's the number one worry I have in Carolina anymore.
That's a great way to put it. Number 4, I mentioned the Seahawks beating the Cardinals twice for the second time in like 3-4 weeks. They control the NFC West now. So here's a statement. The Seahawks will win the NFC West, not the Rams, not the Niners, not the Cardinals, the Seahawks.
I've been surprised by the Seahawks, but I think the Rams are going to be the ones that pull it out. So I would go low on the Seahawks, and it's not even on them. But the Rams have an offense that allows you to play against anyone. You can outscore. Their defense is starting to get better and better. Those rookies have started to play well together. The other thing for the Rams is they're healthy again. Puka Nacua is showing that if he's healthy, he might be, top 3 wide receiver in the league. He's different than, maybe your upper echelon. If you're talking about Chase, JJ, maybe you don't have that same speed as those guys, but he
Right.
is a big body, runs great routes, doesn't drop balls. And McVay is going to be able to get an offense to where they'll be in a race with somebody down the road. I don't think San Francisco is healthy enough. I don't see them pulling it out. The Seahawks, if I trusted their offense more, I think that would put them. I think McDonald's done a great job with that team, but I don't have them making it yet.
Ratliff's reactions. You heard it all here first time ever. Keep it in mind. We'll do some more of it in the future. And these are his reactions. We might change our mind again in the future on some of this. Thank you, Shane. On to our final 60 now. I want to talk about the college football playoff, man. All right, coming up in about a week and a half here. There's a whole bunch of teams playing, but one particular matchup that just warms my heart is Notre Dame playing at home against the Indiana Hoosiers. Notre Dame's a favorite. They'll be a fairly large favorite, rightfully so. But even if Indiana doesn't win this game, who would have ever predicted we would see these two teams going at each other in the college football playoff? I mean, I love it. Indiana has been either a doormat or average for decades now, with few exceptions. Couple little seasons here and there, but by and large, they just don't do this kind of stuff. And here they are. They're at 11-1. They got a chance to win this game, maybe in advance. But either way, for the state of Indiana, it's just a tremendous, tremendous thing to be able to put these two teams out there. And one of them's going to push ahead in the playoffs. Going to happen at 8 o'clock in Notre Dame Stadium. I can't wait, Shane. I know you're the same way.
Oh yeah. I think it's going to be great. I also enjoy that this game is a standalone game on Friday. And a
Yeah.
night game at Notre Dame. This is the first ever college playoff game for the FCS, and you're looking at this. I think it's going to be also to have two teams in the same state, like you said. I mean, Indiana has not been relevant. I like that Coach Freeman said that he actually Googled Coach Signetti so that he had the information on hand about what he is. I think if Nathan Rourke hadn't had his thumb got broken right when they were on the run, and his passing numbers and interception numbers his passing numbers have gone down, his interceptions have gone up. I would have loved to see him stay healthy to see what this offense could really do. I think the problem for Indiana is they're just going to run out of horses. Notre Dame is going to be pumped and ready to go. Since the loss to NIU, they have really turned this season around. And with Notre Dame, it's going to be run the ball. They are going to put pressure on Indiana up front, and they're going to try to just beat the living daylights out of them. And if Notre Dame can pull that off, like I said, I can't imagine what that's going to be like from just a fan/player perspective to have a night game at Notre Dame. And like I said, you're the only show for Friday night, so I think that's going to be a great game.
Very much looking forward to it. There's plenty of things to pick on with college football in general and the playoff system in particular. That's fine, but this delivers right here. This is a really cool thing here that we're getting. And you mentioned it being a standalone game. All right, real quick, tell me who you think should be the favorite for the playoff title, and then give us your final 60.
Uh, for me, it's going to be Oregon. I think for the entire playoff, they're tough defensively, have some absolute weapons on offense. Dan Lanning has been one of my favorite coaches since he was the D coordinator at Georgia. I think he's a shining star, and I haven't seen a weakness out of Oregon this year. They've gone on the road in the Big Ten. and pummeled teams this year. So I think they're the one that stands out. Georgia would be the one that I would worry about. They would be the one that Kirby Smart is going to pull something out of his hat. I thought that coming in, backup quarterback, uh, tough kid took a shot for Beck to have to come in basically without a right arm to hand the ball off. But if Georgia was healthy, I think they'd be even more of a shot. But I think Oregon has a pretty clear run this year.
All right, give us your final 60, man.
So my final 60, I've hit on it throughout the year. I have a huge love for college football, but my biggest and favorite rivalry game is Army versus Navy. It has been for many years. It's also something that every year, now it's moved back a week, but it was always played right around my birthday, so I was always happy about that. But just the way that you see the players go about it in that game. It's two universities where those guys, the easiest part of their day is football practice. And I feel like somewhere down the road, especially in this NIL deal and all these other things that happen for players now, a lot of that's been lost. I love the tradition of the winner gets to sing last, but they're on the field for the other team's alma mater as well. The other thing, the men and women that go to both these universities are giving up their time and putting themselves on the line for, our country. I think that stands tall in this situation as well. The other thing is, one of my favorite players to watch this year is Bryson Daly. I mean, he is a battering ram. That offensive line for Army has been great. Navy, after some down years, has had another great run as well. I think it will be a huge game. And that's my final.
I love it. I won't say much more about Army and Navy because everybody says everything about it every year, especially during the broadcast. But you're right about it being the easiest part of their day. If you don't believe it, if you haven't checked out what the Army and Navy players do the rest of the time, other than football practice, go check it out. It's fascinating. It's the football practice is the easiest part of their day, the most relaxing. I had the privilege 20 years ago to go to an Army Navy game by myself. I drove from South Carolina all the way up to Philadelphia. My sister Ruth was kind enough to get the whole family to kind of chip in on a ticket for me to get to go up there to that game. And I didn't care who won. I just didn't have a dog in that fight. I just wanted to go up there and experience it. So I did. I got to see the bands. I got to see the cadets. I got to see everybody, the whole stadium, and it was tremendous. I loved it. I would do it again, but it was fantastic. So Army Navy, check them out. They're worth a watch. It's a different brand of football, right? You kind of have to be able to appreciate that brand of football. But I love it. Every year I try to watch it. Tricky takes. I mentioned Austin's not here tonight, but that's because they're working on a special Major League Baseball podcast that's on Apple and Spotify. Tricky with two eyes. You can see it there. Check them out. That's Austin and his whole group. They're working on it as we speak. So probably late tonight, early tomorrow, it'll be out and get caught up on all the Major League Baseball deals, not just the Juan Soto to the Mets for a whole pile of Brinks trucks. A pile of Brinks trucks is what they're delivering to Juan Soto's house for the next few years. But all the other deals, there's a lot of them. Austin and company will have that covered for you. Shane, anything else before we kick out, man?
No, the one thing I did want to mention is, we mentioned the group that's from with us. You and Simon did a great podcast too about some draft information in the last couple of weeks. So, I like you said, we have a great group of podcasts that are kind of in that run. Austin and his guys, statistical and thoughts on baseball, especially when the season is hot, is just a great place to go. Even if you're not interested in it, they normally come up with some wacky ways for you to become interested. So as the family grows in the podcast world, always good to take some chance and listen to some new information.
Thank you for mentioning it. Yeah, me and Simon had a lot of fun doing that, especially the Dion and Shador and Travis Hunter part. That was by far the most fun. We'll do something else like that again in the future. All right, Shane, thank you as always. Everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.